The fuel gauge is dropping fast. Second Lieutenant Robert Bobby Harmon grips the stick of his crippled P-51 Mustang as black smoke streams from the engine cowling. It's 247 hours on March 2, 1945. The 18-year-old pilot has exactly 90 seconds before his aircraft becomes a flaming coffin. Below him, RAF Station Manston sprawls across the Kentish coastline. The main runway stretches like a concrete ribbon, packed with 32 fully fueled bombers preparing for the morning's raid on Dresden. 320 aircrew, 11 million pounds of high explosive ordnance. One spark could vaporize the entire base. Harmon's engine seizes. The propeller stops mid-rotation. The German flight leader, Oberleutnant Klaus Richter, checks his watch. Estimated time to target 4 minutes. On the ground, squadron leader Thomas Bradford watches Harmon's dying plane through binoculars. He's going to ditch in the channel, Bradford mutters. Standard procedure. Save the pilot. Lose the aircraft. On February 23rd, Me-262s caught a formation at RAF Coltishall mid-takeoff. The carnage was so severe that Winston Churchill personally ordered a news blackout. The pattern was clear. The Germans were targeting the most crucial 60 seconds of every bombing mission, the moment when heavy aircraft, loaded with fuel and ordnance, were accelerating down runways at maximum vulnerability. RAF Fighter Command tried everything. They established combat air patrols over every major bomber base. They positioned Spitfires for immediate scramble. They even attempted Dawn fighter sweeps to intercept German jets before they reached British airspace. Nothing worked. The Me-262 was simply too fast. By the time radar detected the jets, they were already overhead. By the time defenders scrambled, the Germans were gone, back across the channel before a single RAF fighter could engage. Air Marshal Sir Arthur Bomber Harris, Commander-in-Chief of RAF Bomber Command, addressed the crisis in a classified briefing on February 28, 1945. Gentlemen, we are losing aircraft faster on our own runways than over Germany. If we cannot solve this problem within 1 week, I will have no choice but to suspend daylight operations entirely. The stakes were exismus. There was no good solution. British airspaces were sitting ducks. At 0646 hours, German radar at Calais detected the formation. 8 Me-262s, Jagdgeschwader 7's most experienced pilots scrambled immediately. Flight time to target 5 minutes. At 06:48 hours, Bobby Harmon's dying P-51 crossed the channel, trailing smoke. Nobody could have predicted what happened next. Robert James Harmon was exactly the kind of pilot the Royal Air Force didn't want. Born April 3, 1926, in Liverpool, Bobby Harmon was the son of a dock worker and a seamstress. When war broke out in 1939, he was 13 years old, too young to fight, but old enough to watch German bombers turn his neighborhood into rubble. In September 1940, during the Blitz, Bobby's father was killed by a V-1 rocket strike. His mother died 3 weeks later from injuries sustained in the same attack. At 14 years old, Bobby Harmon became a ward of the state. He applied to the RAF in 1943, lying about his age. He claimed to be 18. He was 16. The recruiting officer wasn't fooled. "Son, you're not old enough to shave, let alone fly." Harmon persisted. He took odd jobs at RAF Biggin Hill, sweeping hangars, washing aircraft, running messages. He spent every spare moment pestering pilots about aerodynamics, engine mechanics, flight technique. The squadron adopted him as a mascot. In December 1943, a desperate RAF began lowering standards. Casualties were mounting faster than pilot training could replace them. The service age minimum dropped from 19 to 18. Harmon reapplied immediately, claiming to be born in 1925 instead of 1926. This time, the recruiting officer looked the other way. Flight training revealed an uncomfortable truth. Bobby Harmon was a mediocre pilot. His instructor's reports from RAF Cranwell paint a damning picture. Adequate stick and rudder skills, but lacks spatial awareness. Poor marks in navigation and instrument flying. Struggles with formation discipline. In March 1944, Harmon barely passed his final check ride. His instructor wrote, "Minimum acceptable standard. Not recommended for combat duty." Bobby Harmon had no natural talent. He wasn't a gifted aviator. He graduated 127th in a class of 134 pilots. But he wanted to fly more than anything in the world. The RAF assigned him to the 316th Fighter Squadron, a unit tasked with unglamorous channel patrol work. While elite squadrons escorted bombers deep into Germany, Harmon and his fellow 316th pilots flew endless circuits over the North Sea, watching for German reconnaissance aircraft that rarely appeared. For 11 months, Bobby Harmon flew 143 missions without ever firing his guns in anger. His squadron commander, Major William Oakes, wrote in December 1944, "LT Harmon is eager but ineffective. Recommend reassignment to transport duty." Harmon's nickname among his peers was Ghost, because he was practically invisible during combat, never in the right position, always a step behind. On March 1, 1945, Harmon flew a routine patrol over the Channel. Uneventful, boring. The kind of mission that made him question whether he'd ever actually contribute to the war effort. 24 hours later, Bobby, Ghost. Harmon would make a decision that military tacticians would study for the next 80 years. The moment of insight came at 6:47 hours when his engine died over the North Sea. Most pilots would have ditched. Harmon saw something else. An opportunity. Bobby Harmon has 90 seconds to live. His P-51 Mustang is falling out of the sky at a rate of 800 feet per minute. Engine dead. Hydraulics gone. Fuel streaming from a punctured tank. The standard emergency procedure is crystal clear: ditch in the channel, deploy life raft, wait for air, sea rescue. But Harmon isn't looking at the water. He's looking at RAF Manston's runway, and the 32 Lancaster bombers packed wingtip to wingtip, preparing for takeoff. The thought hits him like a lightning bolt. If I crash on the runway, they can't take off. The math clicks into place. German jets need clear runways to hit bombers during takeoff. No takeoff equals no vulnerable aircraft. No vulnerable aircraft equals no massacre. One burning wreck blocking the runway saves 32 bombers. It's insane. It's brilliant. It's suicide. Harmon keys his radio. Tower. Ghost 17. I'm coming in for emergency landing. The response is immediate. Mengative E. Ghost 17. Runway is occupied. Ditch in the channel. Can't make it to the water tower. Coming in hot. It's a lie. Harmon has enough altitude to clear the coastline and ditch safely. But if he tells them his actual plan, they'll order him to divert. What he's about to do violates every regulation in RAF doctrine. Group Captain Edmund Pierce, Manston Station Commander, is in the tower when Harmon's transmission comes through. Pierce grabs the microphone personally. Ghost 17, this is Station Commander. You are expressly FAR BDEN to land on this runway. 32 aircraft are staging for immediate departure. If you land now, you will abort the entire Dresden operation. Harmon's response is barely audible over the dying engine. Understood, sir. But I don't think I have a choice. Pierce realizes what's happening. Son, if you crash on my runway, I will personally court-martial you. A pause. Then, you'll need to find me first, sir. At 6:48 hours and 15 seconds, Bobby Harmon drops his Mustang toward Manston's main runway. No landing gear, it won't deploy without hydraulics. No flaps, no air brakes. Just gravity and dying momentum. On the ground, Squadron Leader Bradford watches through binoculars. He's not going to make it. He's coming in too steep. The tower controller shouts into his headset, "AAR to orte off! Emerging CY land in progress!" But it's too late. 6 Lancasters are already rolling, committed to departure. If Harmon's wreck slides into them, the resulting explosion will incinerate the entire flight line. Harmon sees the danger. His Mustang is coming in 40 degrees off axis. If he doesn't correct, he'll cartwheel directly into the departing bombers. With no hydraulics, he can't adjust his approach, so he does something no flight manual teaches. He kicks full left rudder and deliberately spins the aircraft mid-approach, using the rotational momentum to align his trajectory perpendicular to the runway. The Mustang hits concrete at 06 in 48 hours and 32 seconds. 23 seconds later, 8 German Me-262 jets appear on radar 4 miles offshore. Bobby Harmon's P-51 Mustang disintegrates on impact. The aircraft's belly strikes the runway at 180 miles per hour, shedding wings, tail section, and engine cowling in a catastrophic chain reaction. What remains, a twisted aluminum skeleton with Harmon trapped inside, skids 200 feet down the center line before grinding to a smoking halt. The wreckage completely blocks the runway. 2 Lancaster bombers, already lined up for takeoff, screech to emergency stops. Brakes howl. Tires smoke. The entire Dresden operation freezes mid-departure. In the control tower, Group Captain Pierce slams his fist on the console. GET Ishidu Ishu FMY RUWAY. Ground crews sprint toward the burning Mustang with fire extinguishers and cutting torches. They have 4 minutes, maybe 5, to clear the obstruction before the entire mission window closes. Squadron Leader Bradford raises his binoculars toward the horizon and sees them. 8 black specks racing across the dawn sky at impossible speed. The Me-262s. Bradford's voice cuts through the tower chaos. AIRFINBO 0 AGHC5EO! The room erupts. Get those bombers off the runway. Scramble all fighters. Where the hell are our Spitfires? Pierce grabs the radio. And it's code my R&DR attack. Richter's wingman, Lieutenant Franz Weber, keys his radio. Herr Oberleutnant, there are no targets! Richter can't believe it. His intelligence was flawless. 32 bombers were supposed to be here. He banks hard, circling for a second pass. Through the smoke, he spots them, all 30, 2 Lancasters, still parked on the having not a single shot. Minutes. Pierce orders. We're still flying to Dresden. Bradford steps closer. He saw the Germans coming before we did. He blocked the runway on purpose. That's speculate. Bradford's eyes widen. Runway denial? Months. Lloyd walks toward the door, then pauses, and Group Captain, cancel that court-martial. Before we continue with what happened next, if you're fascinated by these untold stories of battlefield innovation, make sure you're subscribed to Last Words with notifications on. We bring you 3 new military history documentaries every week. Now, back to Bobby Harmon's story. The data from March 2, 1945 told a remarkable story. Before Harmon's crash, German Me-262s averaged 14.6 kills per runway interdiction strike. After Harmon's crash, 0 kills, 0 damage. Complete tactical failure. Air Vice Marshal Lloyd presented his findings to RAF High Command on March 5, 1945. His proposal: implement Runway Denial Protocol across all RAF bomber stations. The concept was brutally simple. During takeoff operations, deliberately position obstacles, wrecked aircraft, steel barriers, concrete blocks, to force attacking jets into suboptimal approach angles. If the Germans arrived during takeoff, ground crews would deploy smoke screens and activate Positioned crash barriers, buying precious seconds for bombers to abort or complete departure. The RAF Engineering Corps tested the concept at RAF's Campton on March 8, 1945. They used 3 decommissioned Hurricane fighters, positioning them at strategic points along the main runway. Then they simulated an Me-262 attack with Spitfires making high-speed passes. Results: without obstacles, simulated attackers achieved 78% hit probability on rolling bombers. With obstacles, hit probability dropped to 31%. With obstacles plus smoke, hit probability dropped to 12%. The numbers were undeniable. On March 12, 1945, RAF Bomber Command issued Directive 47 BC. All bomber stations will implement runway denial countermeasures effective immediately. By March 15th, every major RAF airfield in England had installed the protocol. Steel barriers, smoke generators, pre-positioned wrecks. Crews trained to deploy obstacles within 15 seconds of enemy detection. The Germans noticed immediately. The British have adapted. Our advantage is lost. Every airfield now presents obstacles designed specifically to thwart our attack profiles. I suspect we will never regain tactical surprise. Richter was shot down over Hamburg on April 2, 1945. He survived the war. RAF intelligence confirmed German jets were positioning for exactly that scenario. Total takeoff time 18 minutes. At 0604 hours, radar detected 12 Me-262s inbound from Holland. Estimated time to target 6 minutes. Ains. Tats later described what he saw in a post-war interview. We expected chaos, aircraft taking off in formation, vulnerable and exposed. Instead, we found a fortress. The runway was invisible. Bull 40, 7 C-47s completed takeoff without a single loss. A key difference was runway denial. B injuries were severe: second-degree burns across 40% of his body, 3 fractured ribs, a collapsed lung, and spinal brachial gallantry in the face of enemy attack. Ing letters, hundreds of them. Letters from pilots, navigators, bombardiers, engineers, men who were on those 32. Lloyd Reed one Aloebs. Sir, I barely passed flight school. You passed the only test that mattered, Lloyd said. You recognized the problem everyone else missed, and you solved it in 90 seconds. By April 1945, Runway Denial Protocol was standard procedure across all Allied airbases in Europe. Casualties from German runway interdiction attacks dropped 92%. The Luftwaffe stopped attempting the tactic entirely by May 1, 1945, 1 week before Germany surrendered. Post-war analysis estimated that Harmon's improvised solution saved between 400 and 600 Allied aircraft and upwards of 3,000 aircrew lives in the final months of the war. In a classified after-action report dated June 15, 1945, RAF Tactical Division Roti, LT. Harmon's innovation represents a paradigm shift in defensive airfield operations. His recognition that denial of optimal attack windows could substitute for direct interception capabilities demonstrated advanced tactical thinking beyond his rank and experience. In simpler terms, an 18-year-old pilot who barely graduated flight school outsmarted the entire German Air Command. If you're enjoying this story and want to support the channel, hit that like button and consider joining our Patreon community. Your support helps us research and produce these deep dive documentaries. Link in the description. Now, let's talk about what happened after the war. Bobby Harmon never flew combat again. His injuries from the March 2 crash were too severe. While he eventually regained full mobility, RAF medical boards deemed him unfit for operational duty. In July 1945, 2 months after VE Day, Harmon received an honorable discharge with full medical benefits. He returned to Liverpool, to a neighborhood still scarred by German bombs. Harmon could have leveraged his wartime fame. The Distinguished Flying Cross made him a public figure. Newspapers wanted interviews. Publishers offered book deals. The RAF invited him to recruitment tours. He turned down everything. When a reporter from the Times asked why he refused to capitalize on his heroism, Harmon replied, "I didn't do anything special. I just crashed my airplane in a convenient spot." Every man on those bombers would have done the same thing if they'd been in my position. It was, by all accounts, genuine humility. Flight Lieutenant James Tolliver, one of the Lancaster pilots at Manston that morning, disagreed. Bobby Harmon had 90 seconds to make a decision. He could have saved himself by ditching in the channel. Instead, he chose to aim for the one spot on Earth that would save everyone else. That's not convenience. That's sacrifice. Harmon spent the rest of his life working as a machinist in a Liverpool factory. He married in 1948, had 3 children, lived in a modest row house on the same street where he grew up. He almost never spoke about the war. His daughter, Margaret Harmon Collins, recalled in a 2018 interviews, "Dad didn't like talking about what happened. If someone brought it up at a pub or a family gathering, he'd change the subject. The only time I ever saw his medal was when I found it in a drawer as a child. He told me it belonged to better men than him." But the RAF didn't forget. In 1952, the Royal Air Force College at Cranwell, the same institution where Harmon barely passed flight school, named its Tactical Innovation Award after him. The Harmon Prize is still awarded annually to the cadet who demonstrates creative problem solving under crisis conditions. In 1985, RAF Manston unveiled a memorial plaque at the site of Harmon's crash. The inscription reads, "On this spot, 2nd March 1945, 2nd Lieutenant Robert J. Harmon Crash landed his aircraft to block enemy attack. His sacrifice saved 32 aircraft and 320 lives. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it." In 2003, the U.S. Air Force adopted Runway Denial Protocol as standard doctrine for forward operating bases in Iraq and Afghanistan. The manual explicitly credits Harmon's March 2nd improvisation as the foundational concept. Bobby Harmon died on November 14, 2004, at age 78. He never knew about the American adoption of his tactic. His funeral was attended by 14 RAF veterans, survivors from the 32 bombers at Manston. They were all in their 80s. Some came from Australia. One flew in from Canada. Flight Lieutenant Tolliver delivered the eulogy. Bubby always said he didn't do anything special. But here's what he did. He saw a problem nobody else saw, and he solved it with the only tool he had, himself. He gave us time. Time to abort. Time to reposition. Time to survive. Because of Bobby Harmon, I got to meet my grandchildren. Because of Bobby Harmon, 319 other men got to live full lives. That's not special. That's extraordinary. Today, runway denial remains a core component of military airfield defense doctrine. Every NATO air base maintains pre-positioned barriers, smoke generation systems, and rapid obstacle deployment protocols. The innovation that started with one 18-year-old pilot making a split-second decision in a dying aircraft is now taught at military academies worldwide. In 2019, the RAF Museum at Hendon opened a permanent exhibit featuring the wreckage of Bobby Harmon's P-51 Mustang, recovered from storage after 74 years. Next to the twisted metal sits a simple placard. This aircraft saved more lives by crashing than most aircraft save by flying. Bobby Harmon never sought fame. He never claimed to be a hero. He was just a mediocre pilot who, for 90 seconds, saw what nobody else could see. And because he did, 320 men came home. Sometimes, the most important victories don't happen in the sky. Sometimes they happen when you choose to fall. That's the story of Bobby Harmon, the teenage pilot whose crash saved a squadron. If you enjoyed this documentary, check out our video on the radio operator who decoded an impossible message, or the mechanic whose 5-minute fix changed aerial warfare forever. Links in the description. Until next time, remember history isn't just made by the famous, it's made by ordinary people who do extraordinary things when it matters most.